back to Canterbury again this week. That's true.
The Sob Machine may arguably be the most important of all the Canterbury groups, and certainly the most enduring, with a catalog that is much bigger than anybody else's, except for maybe Gong, putting out albums every year up through the mid-70s.
I suppose I could rehash yet again how my sum total of Canterbury prog knowledge before this season started with some Gong and one tune by Caravan. Do we have to? Actually, no, we don't. I got an idea about how we can make this intro a bit more interesting. Oh yeah? They say the best way to learn is to teach, right? Well, Astrid's home for winter break, so... Hi.
Hi.
We're going to talk about prog rock. Is that all right?
No.
Oh, man. Well, it's been nice seeing you.
Okay, bye.
Tell me a little bit about your exposure to prog rock so far. I know that you're a fan of some.
Any exposure I have had has been through you. The biggest things that come to mind right now are like Yes and Rush are the two biggest bands that I've actually spent time with that fit into that genre.
How would you describe progressive music?
It kind of sounds like the way that 70s animated films feel. Take Fire and Ice, for example.
The final battle between the armies of the cold and the keepers of the flame is about to begin.
That's kind of what prog rock feels like to me.
If I were to say the words Canterbury scene, does that mean anything to you?
It rings a bell.
The Canterbury scene is a group of musicians. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a few things, and I want to get your take on some of these things.
Standing on a golf course, dressed in PVC.
In terms of lyricism, I see that they're taking kind of the Zappa approach to where it's supposed to invoke more of a feeling rather than actually be significantly symbolic and deeply meaningful. Except I would say that this is a little more for the aesthetics and the whimsy of it rather than just being tongue-in-cheek like Zappa is.
Right. And you say you've heard this one before.
Yes.
Yeah, where did you hear this one before?
You.
From me?
At some point in my life.
Okay.
Sure.
How does it strike you? Is this something you would listen to?
I think it is. I think this is the closest to a traditional prog rock sound that we've gotten so far. But then you have this really cool little turnaround section towards the 8-minute mark or so. And then it turns into really cool instrumental fusion of a kind.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. So if I were to, prog rock isn't quite my bag, but this is the kind of prog rock I would actually, sit down and listen to and enjoy.
You look different every time.
What if I told you that this album, Rock Bottom, was the first one that Robert Wyatt, a professional drummer, made after falling from a 4th-story window and having himself paralyzed from the waist down? Does that change the way you think about this music?
Not particularly.
Okay.
Although that's unfortunate to hear.
Yeah.
No, I mean, what I was going to say, I've heard this one too before.
Yeah.
Daniel Johnston takes prog rock, you know? That's really the best thing I can say about it.
Okay.
I mean, not to say that it's a bad song, but that's that's really the most accurate thing I can say about it.
I see where you're coming from. No, I had a very strong impression of Chick Corea the first time I heard this.
Oh, I can see that for sure.
Yeah.
I think this is the one I've enjoyed the most, but this is also the least prog. This is the most jazz.
Yeah.
So you making that comparison to Chick Corea kind of makes sense, you know? I thought it was a great tune. Long instrumental prog track. I can see why you get excited about this because I noticed that this is, I think, the most technically challenging. You know, there are lots of small modulations. There are lots of quick changes. There are lots of, you know, fun, really technically challenging things in this piece. So it almost reminds me a little bit of like Mario Kart music. But it was a great tune.
starting with their debut. It was in 1968, and it's a bit like this album that we're listening to today, number 2. It's almost a bit of a companion, although I'd say it's a little more psychedelic.
Begins with a blessing, it ends with a kiss.
And a little more jammy, while the stuff on this album, number 2, seems a little more composed.
It's not so much a collection of songs as it is a space to be inhabited. A headspace for sure, and perhaps a bit more. Because there's something about the vibe created by the sound of the core piano trio that feels to me like accompaniment, or maybe cabaret. As if the album was a live recording of some sort of experimental theatrical presentation. Starting right away with the first section of Rhythmic Melodies, Pataphysical Introduction, Part 1. And using the term pataphysics right off the bat, this is absolutely a grand place for me to start. And for those of you that don't know, pataphysics is a term coined by an absurdist French writer from the 19th century. See, if metaphysics is the study of that which cannot be understood through physics, then pataphysics is the study of that which cannot be understood through metaphysics. Some other highlights from side 1 from Rhythmic Melodies. Hibou, anemone, and bear. Hibou is French for owl, you know.
The owls are not what they seem.
This is the first of a few songs that uses the so what / impressions song form of alternating chords a semitone apart as a basis for some Vox Continental work by Mike Ratledge. Dada Was Here into Thank You Pierrot Lumiere into Have You Ever Been Green. This little mini suite within the larger suite adds layers of psychedelic imagery, fuzz bass, and heavily reverb vocals to the core trio sound. Along the way, they name the middle section after what I feel to be Arnold Schoenberg's masterwork. And then they drop the names of all 3 members of the Jimi Hendrix Experience. But when the pataphysical introduction comes back around at the end of the Rhythmic Melodies suite, I got this weird palindromic sense, right? That the entire first half was meant to be understood backwards as well as forwards. Ever read Dahlgren? Side 2, collectively referred to as Esther's Nose Job. It's interesting musically just as much as side 1 was interesting narratively. As Long as He Lies Perfectly Still is an immensely satisfying 7/4 with shifting accents. Very musical. Great way to start the side. Dedicated to You But You Weren't Listening. Beautiful and difficult 12-string fingerpicking over a structure that changes more frequently than the time signatures change in Good Morning, Good Morning. I need to woodshed that one. Colonel Bruce Hampton used to have a descriptive term for creating shapeless, creative, collective improvisations, sort of directed bits of collective noise. He called it vomit. In the Yeti Trio, we call it fmeh. Well, whatever you call it, this is precisely what's happening on Fire Engine Passing with Bells Clanging. And the next tune, Pig, feels a lot like a return to the clever shifting 7 of As Long as He Lies Perfectly Still, only double time, with Orange Skin Food doubling it again. Plus, I love the sound you get when you apply sample and hold to a filter cutoff. And a door opens and closes into 10:30 Returns to the Bedroom. You know, in that they put a bow on the whole cross sevens motif. Builds wonderfully, and Robert Wyatt's drum fills at the end there are pretty great. So far, fabulous. Great music, great vibe. And they seem to pull off the particularly difficult task of taking the music seriously without taking themselves seriously. I love that.
Very quickly, things changed. The next album, Third, which is arguably their most popular one. Number 3 is more leaning in the instrumental direction. All but one song is instrumental, and it's definitely more jazz inspired with more jazzy soloing. The compositional prowess of the second album is not to be found on the third, where it seems looser and more improvised.
I'm going to split my reflections into 2 parts because my brain has been on something of a trip this week. As music, as an experience, as a mental exercise, I really like Volume 2 by The Soft Machine. The cohesive nature of the experience and the next level intelligence shown in the songwriting, the references, and the musical structure. It all works. In fact, I think it transcends the trappings of just being an album. And in that regard, I put it more in the category of albums like Escalator Over the Hill by Carla Bley and Paul Haynes, or Sketches of Spain by Miles Davis. Sure, the performances, the nuts and bolts of good music are all there, but those things feel to me to be secondary to the overall experience of the album. So that's the first part, the easy part. Volume 2 of The Soft Machine, good.
Number 2 was released in 1969. Number 3 was released in 1970. And with the new decade came a new sound, which was more jazz-inspired and based more in improv. Number 4, from 1971, followed a similar path, as did number 5. Although you can hear the decade's influences seeping in and changing along with each album as they progress. By the time you get to, say, number 6 and 7, it's music that almost hangs together with the likes of the fusion groups of the day, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Return to Forever, Weather Report. It's more in that ballpark. It seems quite removed from what we were hearing on the second album. It's almost hard to believe it's the same group.
The other part is a good deal harder. See, I like to do my homework. So this week it meant that I read The Soft Machine by William S. Burroughs. And one of the very first things that happens in the book is a description of a guy looking to buy junk, heroin. And he uses pretty much the exact same language that Lou Reed uses in the song I'm Waiting for the Man from the first Velvet Underground album.
I'm waiting for my man.
And that stuck in my craw. It put me on edge all week. And to explain why I'm bothered by this is going to take a minute. So let's start with some first principles. See, in my brain, I have cataloged a series of what seem to be generally accepted public opinions concerning music. Are they accurate? Who knows? It's what my brain has collected. For example, it sure seems to me that the general public has agreed that everyone loves Taylor Swift. The general public has agreed that everyone acknowledges that Beyoncé is the world's best entertainer. Everyone has a favorite K-pop band. Of course, I'm personally living proof that these are not universal, but it sure seems to me like these are things that pretty much everyone agrees on. Now stick with me through this next bit, because I'm going to make some statements that might trigger some of you, but I promise I will bring it back around. Included in the sense of the collective reality I have formed for myself is the idea that everyone agrees that the Velvet Underground are cool and important and trend-setting and everyone loves them. And also, everyone agrees that prog and fusion are overlong and unlistenable and the people who listen to them are nerds. This is my perception. Is it true? I don't know. And what got to me this week is the fact that despite the fact that both the Velvet Underground and the Soft Machine drew on the exact same source of inspiration, William Burroughs and the Beat Generation more generally, despite the fact that they both drew from the same source, they're regarded so differently in public opinion. Somehow, the fact that the Velvet Underground tended to dwell on the drug use and the sense of counterculture makes them cool. But since the Soft Machine used the jazz sense of the Beat Generation, along with the humor and the sense of intellectual curiosity, that makes them weird and too niche for most folks. And the more I thought on this, the more uncomfortable I became. Not because of the music, but because of me. Because this is coming from a place of personal fear and uncertainty. If I'm honest with myself, it makes me upset to think that folks are viewing me as less than socially acceptable or less than hip for liking the music I like, when other music drawing from the same inspiration is seen as cool and okay. Or to put it another way, I guess I'm feeling insecure about feeling like I have to apologize for liking what I like. And this dichotomy sheds light on that. Which, by the way, is, I'm sure, where a lot of my anxiety about punk and new wave comes from. Has nothing to do with the merits of the music and everything to do with the thought that I'm being judged. Sorry. No, you're not. Fair. In any event, I'll try to be more relaxed about it all. Meanwhile, Soft Machine's way cool.
For their 8th album, they actually had a name for a change and called it Bundles, and added Alan Holdsworth on guitar. Totally changed the vibe and sound of the group, and for many people this is a favorite Soft Machine album because of his inclusion. It's some of his earliest work as a member of a band, and he is playing some blazing stuff, and in a style that's a bit different than what he would evolve into later. And after that, the band continued in one form or another for an album or two, but I really feel the prime area of their catalog to investigate is the first albums up through Bundles. Great stuff, very important in the grand scheme of progressive rock. I hope you all have a great 2023. Thanks for making this year so memorable, and thank you for tuning in.